area, so I came from there. And I think she might have gotten there either the day before or after me.
Can you explain to the jury how other members of the crew are hired? What goes into hiring camera people and armorers and prop assistants?
Sure. I think the department heads will sort of pick their team. Like for the camera team, Helena would put the word out. She'd go to people she'd worked with before. She would, through the union maybe, or, she would basically collect resumes of people, collect, recommendations from people. She would make the choices who she would hire on a camera team. In terms of, the production designer is the head of the art department. So he would pick his prop master, his set decorator, and then those people would also then pick armorer and prop assistants and people like that. The department heads would generally sort of hire their own, or at least interview and then recommend the hires to the production office.
Okay. And approximately, if you recall, when did you first meet Ms. Gutierrez?
In person, I had a phone call with her before I ever met her. One of the folks from the production office, I can't remember if it was Gabby or Roe, had told me that they had found an armorer. They told me that it was Hannah Gutierrez Reed. I had, of course, heard of Thel Reed. In the business, who hasn't? And so they told me that they had found her. I was keen on having what's called a show and tell, where you would basically have all the weapons that would be used for the movie more or less laid out on tables, and you would then match the cast up with what looks best for their characters and makes the most sense story-wise. And so I wanted to have that, and so the production had her call me, and she introduced herself to me, and we spoke over the phone the first time then. And then a few days later, I can't remember exactly how much, it was a day later, a few days later, I met her in person at the show and tell, and then she was training people that day as well.
And at some point, I presume that filming begins and a lot of work begins. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The pre-production itself is an enormous undertaking as well. But we eventually got to our first day of filming, yes.
I want to ask you a couple of, prior to your work on Rust, had you worked on any other movies where there were real firearms and an armorer?
The movie I had done before, Crown Vic, was a movie about police. And although most of the movie was spent with the two characters driving in a car, so they didn't have anything on them, there were a few occasions we had some armorer days where, there were police weapons and then an armorer there with that.
Do you recall how many days you got to experience an armorer on set?
Maybe 3 or something, like 3 or 4. It wasn't an enormous amount of days, but we didn't there was not a lot of gunfire on that movie, frankly.
Okay. Can you give us an idea of what your focus is in a given day on the set?
Yeah, it's mostly about like who you work with and interact with most. My most direct interactions are with my director of photography, and there's a byproduct of that, the camera team. But you're also talking to wardrobe and production design a lot because you're moving from set to set. They're asking you, is this right? Is this okay? Is this okay? So in general, I would work, my script supervisor is always there with me as well. But in general, you work with the creative departments. You are spending a ton of time with your cast, with your actors. You're blocking the scenes out. You're walking them through their performances. You're sort of getting on the same page together.
Are you largely focused on the behavior of the armorer?
No. No, you see them when they are there at set, but No, I don't generally interact with the armorer during the course of the day on set.
Okay. And let me ask you, after the show and tell and the training that you described, did you reach out to Ms. Gutierrez and compliment her?
Well, there was a day on, so I think, if memory serves, I think the first day of gunfire on the movie was day 3, because that was sort of, that day was on my mind from Jump Street with this production, because it was our biggest day of the movie. It was, just to give you sort of an idea of the scale of the day, it was not just, I mean, we had, a large part of the day was there was an enormous shootout going on between these bad guys and good guys. I think 4 people on one side and 4 people on the other side. There's an enormous amount of stunt work that goes with that. You know, there's gunfire, there's the actors, but then before that, there's also, we were walking the characters through town, so the town was filled with background, which is what we call the extras who come. There were horses, there were wagons. It was an enormous day. And at the end of the day, we had made it. And it was a tough day. And when we have days like that, I generally like to go around and thank folks and congratulate people on doing a good job. If I texted her that day, it would have been because I guess I just didn't find her on set at the end of it. But the day came off, and I think, you know, everybody had a big part in that, so.
Okay. And after that day, you were complimentary of her?
After that day?
Or on that day?
On that day, yeah.
And you were complimentary of the other folks on set that day?
Yeah. No, it's, you know, I don't know if anyone's ever spent time on set, but it's quite a thing to see. The people, okay. It's just a lot of professionals doing some pretty amazing stuff, so.
Okay, great. Can you explain to the jury what Video Village is and specifically what it was on the set of Rust?
So Video Village is basically a sort of large awning or tented area. There'll be a lot of chairs inside there for cast to sit, producers to sit. There's generally a chair for me, which I should have used and never did. I just tend to stay on my feet all day. And then there will be monitors that are basically a feed to the cameras that we're using. So you can watch what the camera sees essentially from what they call Video Village. So you can watch the takes as we're doing them. Sometimes as a director, you'll watch from Village. Sometimes you'll watch from set. I think every director has a different way they like to do it. For me, it's kind of a mix. And inside Video Village, can you see what the camera sees when the cameras are not rolling? Yeah, as long as the monitors are up. Sometimes you're dealing with wireless transmitters and things, and it seems like on any set I've ever been on, people are constantly kind of running behind the monitors and fussing with cables and transmitters and things, and monitors not down, and then it's up, and then it's down. But in general, yeah, you can see whatever the camera sees. If the camera's powered on, you can see what's going on. Based on your experience as the director of Rust.
All right, we have to hit the pause button right now for a short break, but don't worry, you're not going to miss any of this key testimony from the Rust director, Joel Souza. The trial in Santa Fe, New Mexico for Hannah Gutierrez is underway. Gutierrez facing an involuntary manslaughter charge for giving actor Alec Baldwin a prop gun that was loaded with a real bullet instead of a dummy round. Let's get you back into court right where we left off. Rust director Joel Souza.
That you would frequently encounter Ms. Gutierrez?
No, you don't ever see it. Armorers are never in Video Village. They should be next to set.
Can you recall a single time that you saw Ms. Gutierrez in Video Village?
No.
All right. And can you tell the jury generally what your understanding was of where the armor is supposed to be if the actors are using their prop guns that are real? They're real revolvers that they're using as prop. Where's the armor supposed to be?
Basically off camera. I mean, there's crew on set, so you'll sort of behind the camera, there are grips, there's the operators, there's sort of the people that are sort of where the camera can't see them, and you would generally expect the armor to be just sort of standing off screen, ready to hand or retrieve when we're starting or finishing the weapon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you ever under the impression, based on your experience, that it would be appropriate for the armorer to leave real weapons with actors and then leave the area?
No, that wouldn't be what an armorer should do, at least in my experience.
Okay. And can you give the jury an idea of, at the beginning of the filming of Rust, did you even understand what a dummy round was?
Not really. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of exposure to that kind of stuff before. I wonder, I don't exactly have a clear memory of it. I have a feeling the first time I heard the word dummy is after everything happened, to be frank.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, during the time that you were the director on Rust, and to be clear, you are directing the scenes.
Yes.
So when the actors are outfitted with their revolvers and they're preparing to film the scene, you're the person that's there directing. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm talking it through with the actors, yeah.
Did you have an opportunity to see Ms. Gutierrez engage in her armorer duties by providing firearms to actors or retrieving those firearms?
Yeah, I remember times seeing her do that. I do, yes.
Was there ever a time, well, let me ask you this, when we talk about how the armorer and the assistant director are you familiar with the way that the armorer and the assistant director are supposed to do a safety check of guns?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I have a pretty good understanding of it.
Okay. And what is your understanding of whether or not the armorer should load the gun in the presence of the assistant director?
Ooh, to be honest, that I don't really know.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's supposed to come to that moment loaded or if they're supposed to do it in that exact moment. That I'm not certain.
Let me ask you this. Did you ever see Ms. Gutierrez load a gun with dummy rounds in the presence of the actor or the assistant director?
I mean, gosh, nothing that really sticks out to me. I remember times when she would call out what was in it, but I don't remember really seeing her specifically putting things in.
Okay. Do you ever recall any safety checks where you saw Ms. Gutierrez shake rounds before loading them into the gun?
I never saw anyone shake around, no.
Thank you. What is your understanding of the overall I would say, for lack of a better word, the overall amount of power that the armorer has over the firearms and ammunition on the set?
Well, I would say that specifically since it's such a safety matter and it's such a specialized matter that there's really no one on set that should be able to override the armor in terms of the weapons, the ammunition, how they're handled, anything. What the armorer says goes.
And would that include the star actor and producer, Mr. Baldwin?
It would include anybody, yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you a little bit about the COVID protocols that were in place on the set of Rust. We understand that this was during COVID. Tell us how that worked.
Yeah, it was during COVID. We would come to set in the mornings. You'd get in a big line. They would have the people doing the testing. There was, I believe, they had like a trailer there that were there also. There was a specific kind of testing you would do that would be more like the quick nasal swab, and then there was a kind that would take longer to process. They would do both. People would mask, particularly indoors. Were encouraged to. I think everyone tried to be extremely careful, and to my knowledge, we never had a positive test on the show.
Okay. Was there any kind of a requirement on the set that people needed to leave, let's say, the church or another indoor filming area to reduce the number of people inside due to COVID?
Nothing I ever heard of. No, there was the people who had to be there. So.
I am going to let me ask you. You wrote the script, so are you familiar with all of the scenes that were to be recorded in this movie?
Yep.
You understand now what dummy rounds are used for?
Yeah, they're essentially, you put them in so that if there's a close-up on the gun, there is something that is in the gun that is inert, that can't do anything, but looks like there's a bullet in the gun.
To the best of your recollection, was there ever a close-up scene of an actor or a stuntman loading or unloading the lever-action rifle that was assigned to Mr. Baldwin?
No, there was not.
Based on your understanding of the scenes in the script, can you think of any reason that dummy rounds would have been placed inside that rifle for filming?
No, I think, if my memory serves, I believe the only thing that rifle was going to be used for was, there's one scene where it fires and accidentally kills somebody, but we were never going to have the rifle fire in any way because it's an underage actor in that scene holding the weapon, and so we were just going to CGI the gun blast. Okay.
And when you say CGI?
Just computer effects. You put a fake gunshot in digitally in the special effects process after you've filmed.
And hypothetically, if that rifle was going to be used for actual firing, would it have blanks in it and not dummies?
Your Honor, object.
Approach.
Okay, so you just established that there was no scene where an actor would have had access to dummy rounds, bullets to place in to the gun. So again, the prosecution pointing at the armorer who's on trial here. Don't go anywhere. More from this witness who will testify about being shot and surviving. Up next.
I wanted to see what was going to happen before I did so. That Sunday, which would be January the 14th, 2024, D.A. Willis took it upon herself to go to a historic black church in Atlanta, having not responded at all to the motion of...
Those are live pictures happening now out of Atlanta, Georgia, downtown, where final arguments in the Georgia hearing about whether the Fulton County District Attorney should be disqualified from the Trump election interference trial. The judge is examining the allegations about the relationship between Fonnie Willis and the private attorney that she hired to oversee the case, Nathan Wade. We'll bring you updates on air and online throughout the day right here on Court TV. Let's get you back to New Mexico now in the Rust trial hearing about armorer Hannah Gutierrez. Gutierrez and movie star Alec Baldwin face involuntary manslaughter charges in connection to the on-set shooting death of Helena Hutchins. Before we get you back into court, joining us live this hour is trial attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, thank you for being with us. Now, what comes to mind when I'm watching his testimony? I mean, this is the guy that's the overall boss. Nothing goes through him, or no one is hired on set. Nothing appears on set without his knowledge. You know, I wonder, if he had not been a surviving victim in all of this, if he would have been charged as well?
I was thinking about that when he was testifying. Obviously, him being shot dispels any type of intent or negligence, not negligence, but it does dispel a big element you want when you want to charge somebody, because how are you going to charge them with making a mistake that rendered him being shot, right? So I do agree with you that that might have contributed to it, but also I think the main the main motivation to not charge him was he wasn't really the boss. Alec Baldwin was the boss. He was the executive producer. He called all the shots. He was writing the checks. Everybody knew they worked for him. Everybody knew he was the boss. So I think that was that, along with Souza getting shot, is the reason why he was not charged. Because in a typical situation, the director is the boss. But in this situation, it was a movie being propelled by the main actor, who basically was the owner of the movie, I mean, for lack of a better word. So I think those two things contributed in this director not being charged.
You know, I think that that's a fair point, because I was talking in broader terms of usually, but yesterday we did see the behind-the-scenes footage where Alec Baldwin fires the gun and then yells to the crew, "Let's go again." Usually, not his call. Well, let's get you back on the stand right now, back into court, where on the stand is Rust director and shooting survivor Joel Souza.
To be clear, can you think of any reason, and I mean in terms of cinematography and what you understood about the filming of the scenes, that rifle needed to have dummy rounds?
We wouldn't see them. I mean, dummies are purely visual. If they go into the rifle, they disappear into the rifle, so you wouldn't see them, so you wouldn't need dummies in the rifle.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to take you to October 21st of 2021. Can you explain to the jury how that day began?
Yeah, we got there early, as we always did. It was still dark. Jaafar was waiting there for me with mittens and a hat for both me and Helena, as he always did.
And who was the Jaafar?
Serge Svetnoy.
Okay.
And we had realized that I think it was 6 members of the camera team were going to be leaving. And so we knew we were going to not get started, really. It was very early. I think Helena knew that they were going to have to start finding other local folks that were available for work to get us there. And so things started a little later that day than they generally did. And once, I don't remember exactly the number of people that were brought in after the other team had left.
I'm gonna stop you right
Sure.
there. In your experience in the film industry, is it unusual for this kind of a disagreement to occur between production and the camera team?
I haven't had it happen on one of the movies I've directed, but I know other folks who have had that happen, yes.
And were you particularly concerned about whether the cameramen that quit were disgruntled or had any malintent towards the filming?
I wasn't concerned about anybody having any malintent. I think there was a decent amount of acrimony between them and the production office and producers over some things that have been sort of going back and forth. I think they sort of, as there should, they tried to sort of, keep that thing away from me. But I hear things, what's going on? You want people to be happy. You want people to feel good about what they're doing. So,
did you think that the camera crew's decision to leave was somewhat reasonable?
I don't know. That's a tough one. wouldn't want to answer for them. I knew it was going to put us behind the 8 ball a little bit, but then again, people have their concerns. People have bills to pay. They have their own needs. At the end of the day, they did what they did. When they left, I went and shook hands, and I had no hard feelings, and I hope they had no hard feelings toward me, and said I hope we would work together again, because frankly they were pretty darn good at what they did.
Okay.
But I think, again, I'm not 100% privy to all the goings on there, but I think people have their concerns and the things they need to do. I think they felt they did what was right. So.
Okay. So you get to set, you understand that you're going to lose the camera crew, and I think we left off where Ms. Hutchins was going to try to fill some of those roles.
Yeah, I think between, Helena and I think the production office, they would start putting out some feelers in an urgent manner that we need, And so then at some point, some folks came. I don't know exactly how many, there might have been 3 or 4. We were going to be down a camera that day because one of the folks that left was the A camera operator. And so we knew we were going to be operating under only one camera for the rest of the day, which, sometimes you do only use one camera when you're filming, but, that's going to slow you down, because sometimes when you're filming, you can have 2 cameras catching something at once, and now you're going to need to do that twice. So it's going to take twice the time. And so, we were sort of gearing up and girding ourselves for that, and talking about our plan for the day, how we were going to go about this. Because it was already, schedule-wise, it was already going to be a difficult day.
So what was the plan for the day?
The plan for me, as I saw it, I sort of took Dave, our first assistant director, aside, and Helena, and just said, look, I think we all understand when you look at this day's schedule, we're not going to make this. This is not going to happen. And what I don't want to do is start short-changing the scenes that we have in front of us. What we're going to do is we are going to do the scenes that are in front of us. We're going to do them properly. We're going to work our way through. And whatever's left at the end of the day, we can't control that. That's left at the end of the day, and we'll have to figure out tomorrow. But today, we're going to do what we can.
Okay. And so if you recall, approximately what time were you able to get filming underway?
It might have been like 9-something. I seem to remember 9-something, because that's, you're getting going a couple hours late at that point. Okay. Yeah.
And if you recall, what were the first, what were the scenes that were filmed in that session before lunch?
Yeah, we were sort of tucked into a corner of the town. It's a scene where the head lawman in the movie, character's name is Wood. He brings a few other lawmen into town, so it's a decent-sized undertaking in that you've got animals. I think we had a mule or a donkey there, and some other animals. We had horses, wagons, a lot of extras. And you have these 3 characters riding into town at a decent pace and then coming in. It was essentially, it's before a scene and after a scene, if that makes sense. We were filming the first part of a scene where they ride into town. At a different time, we had already filmed the scene where they would walk in to have this business they were dealing with. And then we were filming again their exit.
Okay, Joel Souza is the director, but he also survived this shooting. We are now getting the play-by-play of what happened, what he saw. Remember this testimony. It's going to be so key, especially when we see him on Cross, when he's answering questions about the walk-off on set and the mood of everybody. See how he just kind of brushed it off? He has yet to talk about the shooting. We'll be right back.